A 17-point hole that somehow turns into a win tends to scramble a fan base's judgment. And instead of just reacting to whichever clip hit your timeline first, I want to actually sort through what happened out there position by position. Some of you watched that early pick six and decided Fernando Mendoza might already be a lost cause. Others watched the fourth quarter and decided Mike Washington should be starting over Ashton Junty by week 1. Neither one of those conclusions survives an honest look at the tape, and I want to walk through exactly why, storyline by storyline. That's really the nature of a game like this one. 17 points down is a real deficit, the kind that usually just produces a lopsided score and a quiet post-game conversation. Instead, we got a genuine swing, a rough start from the rookie quarterback, real defensive concerns for stretches, and then a finish that completely flipped the tone of the entire night. Games shaped like that tend to produce split reactions depending entirely on which quarter you happen to be locked into, and that's exactly what's playing out across this fan base this morning. Let's start with the loudest question, because I knew it was coming the second that 80-yard pick six hit the board. Is Fernando Mendoza a bust? I understand exactly why people want to jump to that conclusion. It's Mendoza, it's this franchise, and this fan base carries a genuinely complicated history with high draft capital spent at quarterback for reasons we'll get into shortly. He finished the night 8 for 15, 86 yards, that one interception returned for a score and a sack on top of it. Not a good line by any measure, but I want to hit the brakes hard here because there's no legitimate reason to overreact to a rookie's stat line from a preseason game, especially a rookie getting real, live competitive reps for the first time in his career. If anything, this is precisely the environment where a young quarterback should be allowed to make exactly these kinds of mistakes. Even buried inside that rough stretch, there were genuine positives worth pulling out. Look at the interception itself. It could have gone in a far worse direction than it did. And I actually respected watching him sprint downfield, trying to drag the returner down before that turnover became 6 points on the board. A lot of quarterbacks just stand there and watch that unfold. He didn't. There's also real context behind why this specific stat line looked as rough as it did. The second-team offensive line struggled badly trying to contain Houston's own second-team pass rush. On top of that, there were real drops in genuinely critical spots, and Malik Benson specifically didn't help matters in that department. Some of what happened out there traces back to Mendoza missing throws. Sure, that's fair. But a meaningful chunk of what made this look like a disaster on paper belongs to everyone else who shared that field with him. So, is Fernando Mendoza a bust? Absolutely not. And it isn't remotely close. His actual career hasn't even started yet. This was his first real start under center. Of course, everybody's going to be watching closely. And of course, he's going to make rookie mistakes throughout this process. That's completely normal and expected. I would genuinely rather watch him make exactly these mistakes right now, in the middle of August, than watch an established veteran make the same ones once a real season is actually on the line. And if there's one organization that should understand better than anybody what an actual quarterback bust looks like, it's this one, given the well-documented history with a first overall pick who never turned into what everybody had hoped, stretching all the way back to this franchise's days in Oakland. Whatever Mendoza eventually becomes, we're nowhere close to being able to make that determination off one rough preseason outing. Think about what these specific games are actually built to measure for a rookie in his exact position. It was never going to be about completion percentage or a clean final stat line. It's about whether he processes pressure a beat faster than he did the week before, whether he trusts his first read a little quicker, whether he responds to adversity the way he did chasing that defender down instead of sulking about the mistake. Those are the details a coaching staff is genuinely tracking behind closed doors. And none of that shows up cleanly in a box score that simply reads 8 for 15 with a pick six attached to it. I'd rather judge him on that process than the raw results this early in his development. And the process had real, legitimate positives buried inside an otherwise ugly final line. Staying with the quarterback position, because there's a real conversation happening here, whether this coaching staff wants to acknowledge it publicly or not. Clint Kubiak got asked point blank whether Kirk Cousins is locked in as this team's starter, and he didn't fully commit to anything specific in response. His actual answer leaned on there still being another week of football left to play, that he doesn't want anybody getting comfortable in their role, and that this approach should apply across the entire roster regardless of position. Read into that however you want. Plenty of people are already running with the idea that Mendoza still has a genuine path towards starting this season. Is there an actual quarterback competition happening in this building right now? Honestly, I don't think there is. Not in any real substantive sense. Mendoza hasn't shown enough across these first 2 preseason games to build a legitimate case that he's actually competing for that job this year. Kubiak obviously isn't going to say that part out loud, but simply keeping Cousins off the field entirely in this specific game, the established veteran on this roster, tells you everything you need to know about how firmly that job is already locked down internally. The writing's already on the wall, even if nobody inside that building wants to put it in writing publicly. Unless Mendoza had genuinely blown everybody away, and he hasn't come close to that threshold yet, this remains Cousins' job to lose. Based on everything I've seen so far, I don't expect Mendoza to be starting in week 1. It's also worth separating what a coach actually says publicly from what that same coach genuinely believes internally, because those two things almost never line up perfectly at this exact point in the calendar. Kubiak has every incentive to keep this sounding like an open competition. It keeps Cousins from getting complacent. It keeps Mendoza motivated through every single rep he takes, and it gives this staff real cover if something unexpected happens between now and opening weekend. None of that actually changes the math sitting on this roster. Cousins is the established veteran who wasn't even asked to suit up for this specific game. That decision alone tells you far more than any post-game quote ever could. Now let's talk about the other quarterback in this conversation, because Aiden O'Connell deserves genuine credit for what he did in that fourth quarter. Is he the long-term franchise answer this organization has been searching for? Probably not, and I don't think anybody's seriously arguing that he is. But O'Connell has had real ups and downs wearing silver and black, and one thing has stayed remarkably consistent through all of it. When this team genuinely needs him, he tends to show up in a real, tangible way. That's exactly what happened here, helping engineer 19 unanswered points in the second half to steal this entire game. He threw some legitimately clean, accurate passes out there, put together 2 separate drives that covered roughly 90 yards apiece, and capped it off with the quarterback sneak that finally sealed the win. On the day, he finished 15 for 24 for 166 yards. Yes, a lot of that production came against Houston's third-string competition, and I don't want to inflate it beyond what it actually was. But it's genuinely satisfying to watch a player step up exactly when the moment calls for it. Between the 2 quarterbacks who actually logged extended snaps in this game, O'Connell was clearly the better player on the field, full stop. I know he's facing a real uphill battle for attention here, because Cousins and Mendoza are the 2 names everybody's going to keep discussing all the way through final roster cuts. O'Connell isn't really part of that formal conversation in any real sense, but plenty of fans are legitimately asking whether he deserves to be part of the mix at all, whether there's a real long-term role for him on this roster, barring an unexpected injury somewhere ahead of him on the depth chart, and I genuinely hope that doesn't happen. I'm honestly not sure this team even keeps 3 quarterbacks on the final roster. But if they do, I'd love to see O'Connell stick around exactly as what he's already proven himself to be. A steady, dependable veteran presence who's logged real time in this building and can step in and hold things together whenever the situation calls for it. He's not realistically fighting for the starting job, and he's not part of the developmental storyline either, since that role clearly belongs to Mendoza at this point. He exists in this in-between space, where his best realistic outcome is sticking around as a trusted backup, the kind of insurance policy this staff genuinely hopes it never has to think hard about. That's not a glamorous role in this league, but it's a real and valuable one, and performances like this one are exactly what keep a career like his alive in a sport that doesn't always reward steady, dependable production over flashy highlight reel plays. Now to the receiver room, because I need to directly address the idea already circulating that the Malik Benson experiment is somehow already over. He's built real, legitimate hype throughout this entire camp, and rightfully so, given the genuine rapport he's already established with Mendoza heading into this specific game. That chemistry showed up clearly in the opener against Arizona, where he made a couple of clean, confident catches that had people genuinely excited about where this connection was heading long-term. Right out of the gate against Houston, he flashed it again with a nice 18-yard grab that helped push the offense downfield early in the game. But outside of that one specific play, he had a genuinely rough night. 3 total drops, including 2 specifically, that could have extended crucial drives and moved the chains at exactly the moments this offense needed it most. Watching that unfold was frustrating, especially while everyone was hoping Mendoza would find some rhythm and finally finish a drive with real points on the board. Benson ended the day with just a single catch, despite that early flash. But to say it's over for him, to say he isn't going to be good enough once these games actually start counting for real, that's a genuine overreaction in my view. This is one bad game, just one. I think this is exactly the kind of setback he learns from and bounces back from. And I'm not ready to write off a receiver who's shown legitimate chemistry with his quarterback all camp based on a single rough outing against a defense that was clearly trying to make a statement of its own. Drops also happen to be one of the more overreacted to statistics in this entire sport, precisely because they're purely binary. A ball off the hands looks identical on a stat sheet whether it was a genuinely difficult, contested adjustment, or a routine catch a receiver simply failed to finish. I want to see what Benson does against San Francisco before deciding whether this was a real red flag or simply a bad night that happens to everybody at some point across a long training camp. Here's a tougher one to work through, because I've genuinely enjoyed this specific storyline all camp. The kicking competition looks like it's over and not in the direction anybody around here was actually hoping for. Kai Matsuzawa carries one of the more compelling backstories on this entire roster. An undrafted international pathway signing who reportedly learned this sport by watching football on his own before he ever actually got the chance to play it competitively. That's a genuinely great story to tell, and I thought he was positioned well heading into a real, meaningful battle against veteran addition Matt Gay this summer. Through these first 2 preseason games, though, he simply hasn't made this a real competition at all. He's been a real disappointment across both outings, missing 3 total kicks between these 2 games. 1 field goal and 2 extra points, which is not acceptable production at this level regardless of how compelling the backstory attached to it happens to be. He got lucky the team still walked away with a win last night, because if this game had gone the other direction, his misses would be a significantly bigger part of the conversation this morning. I do think it's time for this organization to move on from him as a real roster candidate. I don't see his path here amounting to much more at this point. He may still stick around in some capacity given the international pathway exemption rules, but until he shows me something completely different, I don't see him beating out Gay for this job. There's a real human element worth acknowledging here too, and I don't want to gloss over it entirely. Roster battles like this one are genuinely brutal for the player on the losing end, especially with a backstory this compelling attached to it. But a kicking job in this league doesn't leave room for a good narrative to outweigh actual on-field production. And missed extra points specifically are about as unforgiving a statistic as exists anywhere in this sport. Gay connecting from 50-plus yards in the exact same game Matsuzawa missed twice is precisely the kind of contrast that tends to settle these competitions quickly, whether anybody wants it to happen that fast or not. Last storyline, and it's genuinely the one I'm most excited about heading into next week. Mike Washington has been one of the real bright spots on this entire roster through 2 preseason games now, and he's been running the football like his entire career depends on every single carry he gets. 15 carries for 119 yards across these 2 outings. A long run of 56 yards against Arizona. Another explosive 33-yard run against Houston. And both of those specific runs could easily have gone the distance for touchdowns with just a little more room to work with. He's averaging nearly 8 yards a carry through this stretch, and according to the analytics community, he currently grades out as the highest-rated running back across the entire preseason. There's a lot genuinely exciting to say about what he's shown so far. Naturally, this has fans dreaming about what a real Washington and Ashton Jaunty rotation could actually look like once the games start counting for real. especially with both of these backs still so young in their careers. The question I keep hearing most is whether Washington can genuinely overtake Genty outright for the RB1 role. Right now, my honest answer is no, not yet. But I do think there's a real conversation building around Washington earning something close to an identical workload alongside Genty once the regular season begins, rather than settling into a clearly defined backup role behind him. That's going to be a genuinely interesting situation to track closely, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether he keeps building this same case against the Niners next time out. What I like most about Washington's tape specifically is that none of it looks manufactured purely by scheme. Plenty of backs put up eye-catching preseason numbers running behind clean blocking against soft, rotational fronts. And that production has a way of evaporating the moment real starters show up on the other side of the ball. Washington's best runs so far have come with real contact in the backfield, missed assignments up front, and defenders draped on him before he's even reached the actual line of scrimmage. Vision and contact balance like that either translates once real football starts or it doesn't. And through 2 games now, I like what I'm seeing enough to keep paying close attention every single week this camp continues. So that's the actual state of this roster heading into the next game. Not the version built entirely off whichever single play happened to trend online overnight, but the version that genuinely holds up once you sit down and watch the whole tape from start to finish.